what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you this picture, and this is, let's see the caption on this picture. The damage of a tiny speck of space debris going 15,000 miles an hour. So the crazy thing about Space Force is you have these like satellites, and there are hundreds of them up there. You can actually see the planet Earth. It's a little 3D model. It'll pop up right in your browser, and you can see thousands and thousands and thousands of little dots that represent an actual piece of debris that's flying around in space. And you can highlight over them. Like right now, I'm highlighting over Cosmos 2277. And I can click it, and it was initially launched in 1994. It's an altitude of 19,000 kilometers, and it is moving at 3.97 kilometers per second. And that is, just think of that, like, this is the stuff we track, and we can only track pieces, so big or so small. Think about all the thousands of little bolts and screws that have fallen off of, old defunct satellites and spaceships. That one piece of space debris hits a satellite, blows up that satellite. There's another 10,000. It's just a catastrophic catalyst that just cascades. I'll keep using C words.
Alliteration.
Because that's what this situation turns into. It just cascades into an unusable orbit where we'll never explore, Mars. We'll never get to the moon again. We'll never be able to launch another, rocket into space if space becomes unusable because of, junk that we've created that's flying around the Earth at thousands and thousands of miles an hour.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into Sweet Talk episode 4. This is on YouTube. You got some nice visuals on here, but of course you can listen to this wherever podcasts are heard. I'm on Anchor now, so that's kind of pushing it out everywhere. I'm not on SoundCloud anymore just because of the limitations on the uploads. So thanks for listening. I hope you're interested in this talk about space, photography, and all that fun stuff, and enjoy. So the intro is always the most cringe part. I usually will just meme it, and that's how it is. There's only one episode online right now, and this is episode 4, so I'm really great about editing.
Okay.
But we'll get them up there soon.
Perfect.
Okay, so let's just jump into it.
All right, I'm down.
I'm joined here today by JT, who runs the channel Run and Gun, and he has a whole bunch of other interesting stuff that we're going to talk about today. So JT, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for Sweet Talk. How's it going, man?
Yeah, glad to be here. Just kind of chilling. I'm not sure right now if it's blizzarding or sunny outside in Colorado. The weather's been a mess here, but that's made life fun. But yeah, so, ask me any questions. I'm down to talk about whatever, and if it's classified, I'll just come to your house and kill you later.
Awesome. Okay, good. I mean, I've kind of been waiting to die anyway. So, okay, so here we go. We need to just come out swinging. Is it true that if you don't use it, you lose it?
You know what? I think it depends. Is that a brain joke? Is that a penis joke? I think it really depends. Or, maybe this whole
whatever
podcast,
you want it to be.
Yeah, maybe this whole podcast is about photography and I'm just missing the point.
It was a dick joke for sure. Cool. Well, in all seriousness though, I'm so curious about kind of your career path. I know you do stuff with the Space Force, you're photographing the vice president, but how did things start out for you? How did you go from a college student, shooting, you recently put up a music video, that clips from a music video you made. How did you go from that to where you are now?
All right, so that's actually a kind of interesting story, and if you got a cup of coffee and can sit back and relax and enjoy, I will tell you the tale. So I joined the Air Force in 2014, back in October of 2014-ish is when I went to boot camp. That was right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree in design and animation, because in a former life, I was also an animator and independent film visual effects artist. So I know that's a mouthful. That's what she said. But that's kind of what I did. And I hardcore procrastinated When I got out of college, I was scared to kind of jump right into the job market. When it came to animation and that stuff, the industry was kind of shitty, to be honest, and it still is for doing visual effects on films and stuff like that. So I just kind of procrastinated. I said, you know what, I'll buy myself some time. Signed up for the Air Force, and I was actually supposed to be a mechanic on F-16s or Helos, or potentially an aerial door gunner, which that's pretty bitchin', right? So I let's see, signed up, got most of the way through boot camp, and then I was told probably, boot camp is 2 months long. So probably the 7th week of boot camp, I was told that the Air Force has no more jet mechanic jobs available, which to this day I still think is a lie or some sort of miracle act of God. And this guy said, I looked in your folder. He was like an internal recruiter because, once you get recruited outside the Air Force, you sign your soul away for a couple years. And then once you are inside, you have, different MOSs or AFSCs, which is your Air Force specialty code, which is a fancy way of saying your job. So you have different jobs, within the Air Force: photographers, mechanics, chefs, cops, everything, to run, a little Air Force society. So I was told this F-16 mechanic job doesn't exist, but I was looking through your folder, and the guy says, I see you have a hobby or interest in photography. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of a job, I wanted to get in the Air Force, and my original recruiter told me, yeah, that's never going to happen. I've never actually seen an Air Force photographer, so you will never get that job. And I kind of accepted it. Accepted that as, I'm going into the Air Force, you know what, let's do some Air Forcey shit. So, gonna be an F-16 mechanic. I was cool with that. And then I had the opportunity to be an Air Force photographer, and I obviously jumped all over that shit. I was also, before I joined the Air Force, I did a little bit of wedding photography, some senior portraits, just kind of messing around. Nothing all that interesting or all that fantastic. I was by no means good. And then I also had a side gig paying for classes at Northern Michigan as the staff photographer. So I'd photograph, plays, football games, all that kind of fun stuff. So fast forward now, and get through boot camp. I go do my training at Fort Meade, Maryland for about 6 months to be an Air Force photographer. Go to my first base, which was in Minot, North Dakota. We had B-52 bombers, ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles is what that stands for. Big old nukes. And that's kind of what our base was responsible for doing, and that's what I was responsible for photographing. So I got to do a lot of aerial photography with, big old bombers and stuff like that. I got to do a lot of flying. We had those old Vietnam era Iroquois or the UH-1 Hueys out there in North Dakota for doing security patrols in the missile field. I got to do a lot of flying in those. But yeah, so then out of North Dakota, I signed up for a program within the Department of Defense where they told me, if you extend your contract past 4 years, because after my 4th year in North Dakota, I was kind of getting sick of that shit. So they told me, if you decide to extend your contract, we will send you to Syracuse University in New York. Department of Defense will pay for it. I actually think the Navy runs that program, but they will pay for you to do a free year at Syracuse. You can either work on your bachelor's, work on your master's. They essentially had a set of courses that, after you take these courses and then you do your extra time in the military, you can go and, train other photographers and essentially be like a force multiplier. So I said, heck yeah, I'll go to Syracuse. I'll do a little bit more time. And that's how Lou and I met when I was in New York. I went down to the Photo Plus Expo for 2 years in a row. I went for 2018, and Lou and I met up in 2019. for some fun, crazy adventures. But
The
yeah,
Game Boy.
that Syracuse was pretty awesome. I spent a year working on some master's credits, some bachelor's credits, and I'll end up returning there probably for some online classes to finish up my master's degree in photo, video, radio, or whatever that, fancy piece of paper is going to say when I'm done. But yeah, so did my year at Syracuse, and then I was sent out to Colorado to be a part of Air Force Space Command, which does a bunch of crazy things. They're responsible for, launching and flying satellites. The GPS that's in your phone is, run by the Air Force and was, launched by the Air Force and currently maintained in Colorado. There are physically people sitting in highly classified operations center that physically fly satellites, which is just mind-blowing to think about. But that's kind of my job, is to document them, their jobs, their way of life, formerly what the Air Force did to support, space operations like satellite communications, all that fun stuff, GPS guided bombs, missiles, cool things like that. And then, as some of you know, the Space Force just stood up December 20th of 2019. So I was in Air Force Space Command, and everyone from Air Force Space Command was transferred over to the new Space Force. So a lot of people still see it kind of as a joke, and it's kind of funny. Steve Carell has his new Space Force show coming out pretty soon. And yeah, it's been interesting. So I'll quit rambling on. I think I've been going on for about 10 minutes at least so far, but and feel free, chop any of this out that's stupid, but
Yeah, it's all really interesting, man.
it's been a ride.
To get from point A to point B is always, everybody's journey is a little different, which is why I'm so fascinated by it, because you are not the norm. You know what I mean? Like photographers or video people, whatever the case may be, when they get out of college, it's like, oh, I'm gonna work in TV. Oh, I'm gonna shoot weddings, right? And you kind of have a trajectory, but you really expected to be in one place, and I think it's safe to say that you landed somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
Which is really awesome. So I want to talk a little bit about the Space Force, because you did mention that people think it's a joke, and I'm sure you have to deal with a ton of that.
Oh, yeah.
But how did that affect your life, going from being Air Force stuff and doing what you're doing to now you're kind of involved with this different name that people have a very different attitude about?
Yeah, so that is a very interesting question, and very pertinent to kind of, my day-to-day that's happening right now, even with all this COVID stuff that's going on. But so like I said, back December 20th was the official Donald Trump signed the National Defense Authorization Act, which had provisions in there for the Department of Defense to stand up a Space Force. And that sounds absolutely crazy when you think about it, because obviously, we're not talking about, space shuttle door gunners and stuff like that right now. But that's definitely something, that's the first thing that always comes to mind is like, hey, can I be a orbital dropship trooper? Can I be Master Chief? Can I join the Space Force and be a Starfleet trooper or Starship trooper or whatever? Which we're a little bit far from that right now. But who knows? Like back when the Air Force started in 1957, they were literally dropping bombs out of balloons. Like there would be, in World War I, they had hot air balloons, and some guy would, fly over the enemy and drop a bomb out of the balloon, and hopefully it exploded on the ground and not in his hand in the balloon. So you can see kind of that evolution from, balloons to now we have, F-35s, we have B-2 stealth bombers, we have, unmanned aerial drones, all sorts of crazy things like that. We are at, and it's really cool to be here. I'm on the ground floor, the initial group of people that transferred into the Space Force. What's the The Air Force is 73 years old, 74 years old. I think the anniversary is coming up in September. What's the Space Force going to look like in 74 years? Like, who knows? Are we going to have, Star Destroyers and X-Wings and crazy things like that? It's just super interesting to think about. But it's been crazy making this, getting back to your original question, making this interesting transition, because how do you, as a photographer, how do you take pictures of space? And I'm not talking about, nighttime time lapse.
Like astrophotography?
Yeah, astrophotography, time lapses, stuff like that. That's not really what I get paid to do. That's a part of it. If I'm telling a story, I also do, I'm actually primarily, I do a lot more video right now with Space Force than I do photo, because it's actually a little bit easier to tell, the Space Force story with, video, animation, motion graphics, stuff like that, because right now we can't shoot a photographer, up to the ISS or up to, which is owned by NASA, not the Space Force. And that's a whole nother discussion, the difference between, NASA being space exploration, funded by a whole nother budget of the government, and then Space Force, which falls under, defense and making sure space is, everyone has access to space. That is ultimately the goal. The entire reason for Space Force existing is to have a separate budget in the government to help, defend space assets like the GPS on your phone that you use for Uber and all that other stuff. But again, getting back to being a photographer, there's only so many pieces of this mission that I can document. And back when I was in the Air Force, I could hop in a Huey, I could hop in a bomber, I could hop in an F-16, a Black Hawk, you name it. Whereas, I can't take a photo necessarily of a GPS. So my job is kind of limited to, we have industry partners like Lockheed Martin that some people may have heard of, Raytheon, Boeing, stuff like that. They're the ones actually, getting contracted by the Space Force to build these satellites. And then you have companies like SpaceX, owned by Elon Musk, ULA, United Launch Alliance, Blue Origin, owned by the Amazon guy, Bezos. But you have all these other partner companies that work with the Space Force to, build a satellite, launch a satellite, and then actually guys in camo uniforms are sitting in classified bunkers that are actually flying these things once they get launched. So I'm very limited on what I can actually take photos of. So one of the coolest parts of my job is definitely photographing, launches out of Florida and California. But it has been an interesting transition from taking photos of, F-16s and B-52s to, Falcon 9 rockets and stuff launching out of Cape Canaveral.
But the public perception of the space program, like a lot of people do think it's a joke. Does that kind of influence you when you're working as a photographer? Does that make you feel like, this is like, I'm doing this thing and everybody's going to think it's stupid anyway. Why am I doing it? Or do you still kind of just press forward and who cares what people think?
To be completely honest, it's a 50-50. So right now, if you are, you were to look up, Space Force and go to the spaceforce.mil website, or you go follow the official Space Force Facebook page, which I run, by the way, you will find an interesting balance of the people that are actually taking it seriously and the people that are just posting their, Starship Troopers memes or their Halo ODST memes or, Space Shuttle Door Gunners or May the Force be with you, which the funny part, and it makes my job a lot easier being like a Star Wars, Star Trek nerd, and being able to, or, growing up playing Halo, dropping bodies in Blood Gulch. But,
yeah. Oh! Bad guy. Drive. I got him. I saved your... Thank you, Sam.
Oh my god, I'm sorry.
Sam, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Dropping a little bit of street cred right there. But yeah, it makes my job easier because there are a lot of, you have to think, we are still a military branch with, a military job to do, a lot of my bosses and the people that are wearing the super high up ranks aren't, always as fond of these, Star Wars memes. So you won't see me dropping, Star Wars memes on our official Facebook pages. But just know that, if you are one of those people, the little guys appreciate it. I'm still one of the little guys. Even if the higher ups, the people you'll see on TV, my boss, Chief of Space Operations, General Raymond, he might not think they're as funny, but we still get a giggle out of them. But it makes my job, there are 7 billion people in this world, and probably a couple thousand truly understand, why Space Force exists and understand, the mission that actually has to get done so that people can, turn on their phone and Uber over to Pizza Hut, get their, drunk tacos from Taco Bell, stuff like that.
That is important.
Right. Something as simple as, using an ATM at a gas station, that has to get pinged off a satellite, get a time stamp confirmation, and ping back so that your satellite works, or so that your, ATM card or credit card works. Like, I don't have the figures on me right now, but at any point in time, if GPS were to go down, or any of our crazy, big satellites like that were to just stop working, the entire world economy, kind of like this COVID thing, the entire world economy would just come to a complete halt. And that's kind of partially what my job is, and it's definitely a struggle, is to take photos that communicate the importance of these things that are way far away that you can't see. Like, why is a GPS satellite important to you? Or, Joe Schmo, your neighbor, why is it important to me? So my job is to kind of visualize, and that's why I was saying I do a lot of video work as well, and take people's a lot of people are going to these Star Wars memes because they truly don't understand what we do. So they kind of have this sci-fi hope, George Orwell, I guess, hope of what we do, or science fiction view of what we potentially do. It is pretty interesting if you get into it. It might not be as interesting as Millennium Falcon or something like that. But to really summarize kind of what my job is and how I deal with those, the memes and stuff, I definitely appreciate the memes. And I do understand that as, a photographer and a visual communicator, I have to, understand all the memes. I have to be kind of on point with my internet street cred a little bit, and know what the heck's going on. So I sit back and I laugh at, myself, and I laugh at the Space Force as much as the next guy. But I also, two people out there that think it's a joke, you got to understand, if somebody were to flip the switch and, shut off GPS, the world is, how much of the world relies on just, a single constellation of satellites, not to mention, SATCOM, satellite communications, infrared satellites. Like there was recently that the missile attack in, I think it was Iraq, the missiles that came from Iran. Infrared satellites had detected those missiles before, or instantly after they launched, basically, and were able to let people know at those bases, hey, there's, Iran just launched missiles, they're headed your way, go seek shelter, and saved a bunch of people's lives. Like, if North Korea, without trying to get into politics, if North Korea were to launch missiles, we would just instantly know, whereas, in the 50s, 60s, we were worried about like the Cold War and, Russia launching missiles and us launching missiles, and who knows what would have happened. But, now we have capabilities to instantly see when somebody launches a missile to save, people on the other end of that missile. So it is, like I said, definitely appreciate the memes. We get a kick out of them. Trust me, my coworkers and I are sharing Space Force memes back and forth every day with each other. But we also, kind of understand the gravity, I guess, of the situation. But I think, I give it about 5 or 10 years. We'll have, at least in 5 years, we'll have like a new administration. And then Space Force won't necessarily be linked to the politics. And I think that's a lot of the bad rap that the Space Force gets is the policies and politics that it's currently linked to. Because everybody talks, on Twitter. You can go follow our Twitter Space Force page, and you'll see that everybody refers to it as Trump Space Force, which most people don't know that the whole, Space Force standing up was a bipartisan thing. Both parties were on board with it. And Reagan was talking about a Space Force. Bush was talking about a Space Force. There's rumors about a Space Force when Obama was in office. Doesn't matter who you like or who you don't like. It's a bipartisan thing. Everyone agreed to, get it done. And, all the secretaries of defense, like Mattis, and we have Esper now. But everybody agreed on it. Congress wanted it, all bipartisan. So hopefully within the next couple of years, we'll see some of that, political junk die down a little bit, and people will just kind of recognize us as an actual, military branch.
Right, absolutely. I just got to take a second there to say you had a really great gravity pun there. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but I liked it.
Oh, did I say something about Sandra Bullock? No?
No, you just, the way you just said the gravity of it. And I was like, man. Like I was losing my mind, not screaming.
I see what I did there.
But I completely, it's really interesting to see it from this perspective because like you were saying how people don't understand the importance of what you guys do with GPS. Like I literally had no idea about that either. So I think it's really interesting to see that side of it. Like I understood the goal of like keeping space accessible and free, but the implications of the GPS stuff you're talking about, that's really interesting. And I really had no idea that you guys were dealing with stuff like that.
That's why Space Force exists, because if you take a satellite and, some country thinks it's a fun game to shoot an ASAT or an anti-satellite missile at a satellite and it blows up a satellite, well, that's cool and all that you just blew up a satellite, but you also created tens of thousands of pieces of space junk or space debris that are now zipping around, the Earth at 15, 20,000 miles an hour. Like I'm looking at, here's a Chinese piece of debris, the Feng Yang, that's going, 7.59 kilometers per second around the Earth. If people see this stuff in .space, they'll really get a grasp on all the crap that's out there and why Space Force is serious and why we're talking about, protecting space and protecting our satellites. It's serious business. It's not, all aliens and space travel and warp speed and stuff like that. There's, serious, billions or trillions of dollars in economic consequences if we, screw this up for future generations. Like, it's not, we can't take a garbage truck or a net out to space and catch things going 15,000 miles an hour. That would be cool. Like, this shit's stuck out there forever. Like, and if we keep creating more space junk by, blowing up satellites or whatever, it's a cascading, never-ending effect. And then all our dreams or hopes of ever going to space, gone.
Dude, my brain is like evaporating right now. It's so crazy. So right. In terms of the team itself, like you were kind of referencing the people above you and your coworkers and stuff like that, is it a big team? Is it a small team? Like what's the Space Force look like?
So the Space Force is currently 2 people. And tomorrow, I believe it will be 88 people. And I'll get into that in a second. Okay. So right now, there are physically 2 people that have sworn an oath to be in the Space Force. That is our Chief of Space Operations, the big dog, our 4-star General Raymond. He is our Chief of Space Operations. He is, not sure if anybody listening knows what, the Joint Chiefs or the Chiefs of Staff of all of the different military branches have their top boss. So, the U.S. Marines have their top boss, Space Force, Air Force, Navy, Army, so on and so forth, all have their top boss, and they are direct military advisors to our Secretary of Defense and our President. Again, no matter, what president's in this office, it's a bipartisan group, and it's the military doesn't get into politics. Their job is to, protect, defend the country. That's it. So, that is one of our bosses. Our second boss is, our Chief of Space Operations, General Raymond. He's a 4-star officer. Now we have on the other side of the house an enlisted guy, Chief Toberman. He is our, Chief Master Sergeant of the Space Force, and he works hand in hand with, General Raymond. So General Raymond is more kind of mission oriented, take care of the mission, get the mission done. Our Chief Master Sergeant, his enlisted advisor, is kind of more of the people person. He takes care of, the people that are getting the mission done. So those are the only two people right now that have sworn an oath to be in the Space Force and are actually commissioned and enlisted in the Space Force. Now, right now, I am currently assigned to the Space Force. So back when I was saying December 20th, everyone who is a part of Air Force Space Command got switched over, a whole bunch of fancy renamings, new logos, new letterheads, new signature boxes under email, super technical stuff like that. It was more of a big name change, more than anything else. Our name change from Space Command to Space Force, and our logo changed a little bit. So now I am currently assigned to the Space Force. So as of right now, I still wear an Air Force uniform. I might be wearing a Space Force uniform pretty soon, but I am in the Air Force assigned to the Space Force. So I kind of get the best of both worlds right now. Like, the Air Force still pays my paycheck. I still get the opportunity to shoot, photos of aircraft and stuff like that. But my primary mission and my current assignment is to the Space Force. So, I think I probably completely botched that question, but yeah, so there are 16,000 people that are in the Air Force assigned to the Space Force, and I think that number's correct. But there are actually right this second 2 people that are physically, enlisted and commissioned into the Space Force, and then tomorrow will be a commissioning ceremony at the Air Force Academy in Colorado, which I will be photographing, and that's where Vice President Pence is going to be tomorrow. But there are going to be 86, I believe, it's 86 or 88 cadets graduating out of the Air Force Academy to be new Space Force members, and we call them space operators. They're the ones that actually, sit behind a computer console and they fly, they fly GPS around, they help with launches, fun stuff like that. So hopefully that kind of is going to be my shortest answer for that question.
See, that's really crazy too. Like just the number jumping up like that, from 2 to 88. You said that's
right.
Wild. But I also, you referenced Chief Master, and that was like another one where I was kind of like losing my mind because all I can think of is Master Chief.
Right, which is funny because Master Chief is an actual rank in the Navy.
Stop it.
Yeah, you have a Master Chief Petty Officer. Is
he a Spartan?
Oh, obviously.
All right, so before we start discussing all of Halo, I do have I do have one more Halo related thing, and then I swear I'll stop. Did you happen to see the meme where someone took the Halo theme and put it under that Mike Pence speech where he's announcing the Space Force?
American ideals into the boundless expanse of space. While other nations increasingly possess the capability to operate in space, not all of them share our commitment to freedom.
Yes. Yeah, definitely have. And like I said, we're kind of on the front line of memes running, the unit that I'm assigned to in Colorado actually helps run, all the social media pages. We do a lot of the media stuff, photo, video, graphics, social media, all that good stuff. I'm involved with kind of all that. So I am I am very up to date with the most recent, Space Force memes because we're kind of, like I said, on the front line of
Yeah.
getting those sent directly to us because everybody thinks theirs is more original than the last guy, and trust me, they're not.
Have you ever made a Space Force meme?
Oh, I may have. I may have throwaway accounts, but that's not the point here.
T.
But
That's
yeah,
exciting.
I am well versed in the Space Force memes because we're the first ones to get them, and before we have to block you, we do get a good laugh out of them. So I'll say that.
So this might be a weirder one, and maybe we're kind of straying too far, but whatever. I'm just curious. Where do you stand on aliens?
Ooh, that's a good one. So, I was not allowed to participate in the Area 51 takeover on Facebook.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so because of my job, I kind of sit on the other side of that fence, pun intended. Oh, I don't really know. So, what I do have to say is that I've seen some weird things, I'll preface this before I got in the Air Force. I'm pretty sure I've seen a UFO before I got in the Air Force. After I've been in, I don't think I've seen one. So I think I'm safe to say that. I'm pretty sure I've seen I've seen some funky things flying around, back when I was, 9 or 10, when you see something with, some funky, 5 or 6 triangular shaped lights that zips over your house in the middle of the night when you're having, a bonfire with friends. I've seen some weird stuff. Sober. I'll preface it with that too, but to be completely honest, I've seen crazier things outside of the Air Force than inside the Air Force, and I've seen some pretty darn cool aircraft like B-2s, the big stealth bombers, some F-117, some, big old U-2s that go, way up into the outer layers of the atmosphere, the big spy planes. I've seen some cool shit, but nothing as cool as a UFO. Trust me, I wish we had them stored somewhere because I'd love to see them.
Do you think though it's like something that's out there, like that we just haven't discovered, or do you think it's kind of like,
That's
don't
so
know?
hard to say because it's actually kind of interesting because we get those questions every day, and I can't be a random staff sergeant in the Space Force being like, oh yeah, we got fucking aliens guy, and reply to people like that on Facebook. Like, I have not seen good enough proof, whether in the military or outside of the military. I haven't seen anything good enough so that I can be like, without a doubt, yeah, there's fucking aliens, man. I have not been stoned enough to say that sentence before now either. But yeah, I haven't, to be honest, I wish there was, maybe, I don't know. I still, in my opinion, like, I think I hold the opinion of a lot of people that's aliens came to this planet and at some point, or they looked at us and they're just like, these guys are too fucking stupid. We're just going to leave them in some, outer asteroid belt, and hopefully they don't multiply too much. Like, they look...
Yeah, they saw my deep fried memes video and they were like, this is not good. We're getting out of here.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, they're de-evolving, so we're going to leave them alone until they implode, and then we'll just kind of push that planet off into the sun when they're done, and we'll pretend like that never happened.
I'm kind of in the same boat, not in like the nihilistic sense, but just in the like, I don't not believe in them, but I also personally have never seen anything to make me believe in it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, I think, we barely have an understanding of how big the universe is. Like, I think recently I just saw an article where they were saying they found like the edges of the Milky Way.
Right.
And it's just, everything is so massive. I just can't fathom the idea that we're the only thing.
Right.
Like,
to that end too, we haven't even discovered everything that lives in our oceans. Like, we don't even know enough about our own planet, and we're discovering, new creatures and crazy things, every day about our own planet. Forget, the thousands of, potential life-breeding planets out there. But I do want to tie this kind of back to like my job and what I do, like the vastness of space. Like there can't, it's, you can't, yeah, even we barely know about, how our own planet works, how the moon works, how the sun works, how, we just fired Pluto within the last couple of years. Like we don't have our priorities straight. So yeah, we kicked Pluto out of our solar system, and I don't trust anybody after that.
Yeah, that's big sad. I'm not gonna lie. So, do you think your job is ever gonna bring you to space? Do you think you'll ever actually go up to like ISS or something like that?
So we talk about that all the time within our unit and some of my coworkers. Like, what would whenever I do an interview, so I do a lot of video interviews. I'm also my job title. I do a lot of photography right now. My job title is kind of more of a Space Force video director. I do a whole bunch of like mission related videos, and we call them hoorah videos with shit blowing up and stuff like that. But anywho's, yeah, we talk about that a lot, like as coworkers. And what I was getting at was one of my questions I always ask to people, and I'll throw this out at you because, I'm running this interview now. I'm the captain now. So I'll pose it to you. If you had the opportunity to launch yourself, well, not launch yourself, like not a giant trebuchet, but let's say Elon Musk makes a cool, is it the Dreamliner rocket or something he's working on right now? If he made some cool ass rocket and he said, hey, if you get in this rocket, it's going to go to Mars, and we're trying to start a new colony on Mars. But there's no guarantee that this thing's going to get you home. And right now, we don't have a way to get you home. There's no return trip. We're working on sending a rocket out to you later to bring you home. But again, the amount of time it takes to get to Mars, and shipping, once we've shipped you there, we still got to have, the gas in the tank to ship you back.
Right.
So I guess my question, Lou, to you, would you hop on a rocket to Mars knowing that you may or may not be able to ever come back?
Dude, I read The Martian, so I'm gonna say no.
Okay, I've seen the movie.
I love astrophysics. The movie is cool too.
Oh,
I don't want to be
awesome.
one of those like, oh, the book's better. But like they did cut out a huge part of the book, which was like my favorite part of the book. But at any rate, no, I don't think I would be the right person for that. I don't do well on planes.
Okay.
So I can only imagine what a rocket hurling into space would do. But
Random side note, I'm in the Air Force and I hate flying.
do you ever fly yourself? Like, do you have like a pilot's license or?
No, I'm actually going to start working on my private pilot's license pretty soon.
That's
I
it.
thought about commissioning to be, if I ever had a dream job within the military, it would be a helo pilot. I just think,
What's that?
flying a Black Hawk or an old Vietnam era Huey would just be, bitching, but probably, honestly, probably not something that's ever going to happen. But I am working on, I wanted to start this summer. Who knows if that's going to happen, but getting my private pilot's license just for me to, fly back and forth places, and do like aerial photography and stuff like that.
How often do you fly for work? Like, how often are you going to different spots?
So, oh man, everything has changed a little bit with, the COVID stuff going on and with the whole stand-up of Space Force. Like, actually, a couple weeks ago, I was supposed to be flying out to California to work on what we call a mission video for them, essentially where we take, we'll fly out to a base for a couple days, and then we'll photograph kind of what their mission is and what their day-to-day stuff is. And we'll time it up with like a cool soundtrack or something like that and make a, highly produced cinematic something that, the commanders can show to their troops to get them all like hyped up and pump up morale and to show other people outside of, the guys that are sitting around flying, GPS or stuff like that, what they're actually doing day to day and kind of educate the public on that. But before Space Force, while I was still a part of Air Force Space Command, I was flying probably twice a week, but it was on commercial, like Delta and stuff like that, back and forth across the country. I was going down to Florida to photograph rocket launches, GPS satellites and stuff that were getting launched, the SpaceX rockets. I was going out to Vandenberg, which is in California. I went out to LA Air Force Base, which was pretty cool. Yeah, I was bouncing around the country like crazy, at least twice a month. There was a couple times where I was going once a week, hopping on a plane, racking up those United Airline miles, just photographing launches. I went out to Suffolk, Virginia to photograph Space Command exercise, where essentially they brought in a whole bunch of space operators from, let's see, Japan, Poland, Germany, the Netherlands, South Korea, I believe Thailand, Canada, the US, Brazil, and Italy, and had all of these allied partners like working together to fly satellites. Because another point I want to get to, and I know I keep sidetracking, there's just, space is like a giant ocean, and we're just like barely skipping a stone off of the surface of all there is to think about when it comes to space. But yeah, I've been flying a bunch of missions, to do these, video productions and photos and stuff like that. And just doing general base documentation just to have, on record for base historians and for people 100 years from now to look at that Vandenberg Air Force Base and say, hey, that was pretty cool what this base looked like 100 years ago and what these people were working on 100 years ago, just for, government documentation, National Archives and stuff. But getting back to your question, I don't, these days, now that I'm in the Space Force, I don't fly as much on like Air Force aircraft. I've flown in, let's see, like my mission before this with the bombers in North Dakota, I flew in B-52s all the time. I flew in the UH-1 Hueys, the Vietnam helicopters all the time. When I deployed, I flew on a C-5. I think I've flown in a Black Hawk and a couple other just, random C-130, random stuff like that. I should be flying in a C-130 pretty soon. I volunteered to help out with some Army exercises at Fort Carson. That's about probably an hour south of the academy, the Air Force Academy down here in Colorado. They have some pre-deployment training they're doing. And I was like, yeah, I'll jump out of a C-130 and take photos of it. So that's, hopefully that kind of answers the question. I don't fly as much now. And if I do, it's usually like an Air Force related flight. And especially with this COVID stuff, I'm not going anywhere right now except from, my apartment to work.
Right. Of course. Yeah. So when you're doing these jobs, like you mentioned, like you were doing like rocket launches and bases and all that stuff, what's the blend for you? Like, are you allowed to get really creative with the work that you're doing, or is it more kind of meant to be practical? Like you had mentioned this idea that like 100 years from now someone can look at these. Like, are you allowed to kind of go crazy the same way you would with like the bokeh stuff that you do on your Instagram, or do you have to be like very rigid and practical with the way you shoot?
Let's see. So a little bit of both. My primary, mission for the Air Force or Space Force and the way we are trained is to, our job is to follow like AP photojournalism rules. So that means, when it comes to photographing, my job mandates, and we actually have tons of documentation, which are called DODIs or DOD, Department of Defense instructions. And it's essentially, pages and pages and pages of laws for the military that I can either be thrown in jail or fired if I violate. So, if that doesn't, make you want to do your job to a T, I don't know what will, because I don't want to end up in Leavenworth for something stupid. So, with that being said, all of those are based off of photojournalism and film photography rules. And some of them are a little, like I said, they're based off of a lot of film photography rules. With, when it comes to editing, what you're allowed to do with dodging and burning. Like, I'm literally not allowed to clone stamp a damn thing in my photos unless it's, somebody's security badge or it's something classified that would, lead to some sort of national security, something or other. So that's the only time like I'm really allowed to get in there and what I would consider like a massive edit. Like, let's say there's some guy that, let's say it's Secret Service, and I have to blur out the name on his ID badge for, his protection or something like that. And then I would have to state in the caption of the photo, I blurred out this badge for, security reasons.
Okay.
So everything we do, and this is it's a weird double-edged sword, because everything we do has to essentially like support the truth or has to be like a true statement. Like I said, we are bound by our Department of Defense rules for photography, which really are more or less coming down to, like you said, straight documentary kind of photojournalism images. Like, show me the photo. I don't care how pretty this photo is. Show me a photo of what happened. Was it a photo of the Secretary of Defense shaking hands with, the president of Brazil? Bare minimum, I have to come back to my office with that photo in my hand. I can make that photo realistically if I want to, as pretty as I want. I can shoot it really boring with a 14 millimeter, lens with infinite depth of field and, crazy distracting things in my background. Of course, my supervisor's going to be like, "Are you a fucking idiot? Why did you take this horribly composed image? Yes, that's what's happening, but it looks like trash. You could have done better." Or, I could take this, super creamy bokeh photo with a 400 mil at 2.8 from, quarter mile back of the same person, shaking hands with this other person for like a dignitary visit or something like that. But what it comes down to is, and then internally, so we have a handful of photographers within, the Air Force, and we internally all kind of know each other, and we're all kind of competing with each other. So there is a competitive, artistic, kind of friendly competition within, and I compete with Marine photographers too. Like, I have a buddy who's in the Marines at Camp Pendleton in California. I have friends, all over in different branches in the Navy, the Army. And we all kind of internally kind of compete with each other of who's taking, the most grungy photo of some Marine crawling through a mud pit with his rifle slung around his back, or who's taking the prettiest photo of, or the prettiest silhouette of an F-16 flying across, the sunset or some shit like that. But so to answer your question, we do both. We take, the hardcore journalism photos, but we also are always trying to get, the best looking photos. So we'll push things like, if I have the opportunity to take some cool ass portraits with, I was telling you guys earlier about a trip I did to Suffolk with a bunch of our allies and stuff. I did a little photo portrait series, which I called Allied Faces of Space. So I took these space operators from all these different countries, from Japan, Korea, the US, Brazil, Poland, everywhere, Italy. And I took portraits of them in front of this giant space operations center. So I had them walk up this stairway and look towards me, and there happened to be this giant projector that was shooting all the way across this operations center, and it was projecting all of these giant high-tech screens of like satellite orbital paths and, satellite collision paths and numbers and data. And I took these super shallow depth of field, like f1.4, 1.8. I shot them with the Nikon Z6 and a Sigma 85 1.4. So yeah, like you were saying, I took these super shallow, creamy bokeh, had all the tones, like literally all of the tones I counted. Greatest tones ever. There are never going to be any tones like this.
Right.
And so, I mean, they were, and I was allowed to, publish those. I'll share those eventually. I don't even think I've personally published those on any of my own pages. I try and keep, my personal stuff and my military stuff separate a little bit.
Sure.
Just so there's no like weird conflict of interest there. Like I talk about it a little bit, but not too much. I don't want to, accidentally say anything that's going to get me fired. So I got to be careful there. But Yeah, so just like an AP journalist, somebody from New York Times, their job is to tell the truth, but tell it obviously in a visually appealing way. That's the same thing with our job. We have rules where I'm not allowed to, you know, if there's a guy, let's say, walking down the street and I don't like that there is a telephone pole behind him, I'm not allowed to go in and, clone stamp out the telephone pole or pull any crazy Steve McCurry tricks like that, or do anything crazy, getting rid of, stakes in the ground at Kent State or anything like that. Everybody knows all the big, historical people that got caught, photoshopping shit out. I'll get fired. I'll get fired for any little minor thing trying to pull anything like that, because that damages the credibility now of the Air Force, and people are going to say, "Oh, well, is the Air Force hiding some sort of UFOs and clone stamping UFOs out of their photos or something like that?" So ultimately, my job comes down to taking the photos that make the Air Force look good realistically, and then having the best photo in camera so that I only have to do very minimal editing that's supported, supported by photojournalistic ethics. Like, I can do dust removal, I can sharpen my image, I can do some minor dodging and burning, not like these crazy shits that you see with these crazy Instagram pages and stuff like that. Nothing like that. Can't go in and start retouching everybody's faces, and it's just like a photo that you would see in a newspaper. That's kind of the bare minimum of what I need to take to get my job done. If I want to make it really pretty within my limited set of rules, I'm free to do that as well.
So tomorrow, when you go shoot Mike Pence, are you held to like similar standards there? Are you not allowed to do any kind of retouching on him or anything like that?
That is correct. So tomorrow I will be photographing, let's see, that will be April 18th, the Air Force Academy graduation, which is going to be here in Colorado. Yeah, so when I'm photographing him, I'm not allowed to go in and start doing, super ridiculous dodging and burning to his face, or make him look like an Instagram model or a Pinterest model or anything like that. I can't go in and start doing, frequency separation on his face and photoshopping dimples or acne or anything like that. Yeah, none of that. It's like, if this photo were also going to be, because we have, I've had photos shared by Fox, CNN, ABC, Yahoo Business. I've had 3 years in a row a set of exercise photos shared in Popular Mechanics magazine, and it would be the same as if, New York Times went out to send a photographer to go take photos of Pence. They don't have time, most of all, to be retouching, an eyelash on his cheek or something like that fell off, or something, ridiculous. I took the photo, I can do, my contrast adjustments. I can, get rid of some dust off my sensor, but that's kind of it. I can make it look as pretty as I can, again, within those set of rules of what I'm allowed to do.
So you're not taking Pence to like those neon signs and doing bouquet portraits of them?
I asked, but Secret Service said no.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, that's what
What's
I
it
said.
like working in that scenario? Like, when you're involved with doing your job, taking portraits, and there's Secret Service around, and you're working with, again, we're trying to stay away from politics, but you're working with a prominent political figure. What's that like for you as a photographer?
So this is my actually second time taking photos of Mike Pence, the vice president. I took his photo. It's been almost 3 years now. I think it was back in 2017, November-ish. He came out to visit. It was right after the 2016 election. About a year later, he came out to visit North Dakota and our missile silos. So I got to take some really cool photos with him in a nuclear missile silo in North Dakota, which was super awesome, because he brought a team of I think they were like New York Times and all these press photographers with him that normally travel with him to get, the first photos of him doing stuff. None of those photos or those photographers were allowed down in the missile silo. I was the only one, since I was military, that had the clearance to go down there. So if you look on Twitter and you look up, Mike Pence missile silo, you'll see my photo of him, with his arms crossed in front of a nuke, which is pretty cool. But Secret Service and I we essentially, holistically, we have the same job. My job is to, kind of keep him safe. Secret Service is to keep him safe. And when we both know that we both have the same job, even though we work for kind of two different agencies, they work for, Secret Service or Homeland Security or whoever they work for, and I work for the Air Force or Department of Defense. My job is to get my photos while maintaining, my couple foot distance from him and keeping him safe. And when Secret Service, when you have a good relationship with them, and we usually build that, a couple days before, Secret Service will always go out early to locations that the vice president or president's going to be at to do like security sweeps and stuff like that. And that's a good time where I'll meet up with them or, have a phone call with them or go to the location with them and just kind of you state your intentions with them, even though they know you're in the military. You're probably, and I can't say everybody in the military is a decent person because not everybody is. We have shitbags, and no matter what job you work in. But if the Secret Service kind of gets to know you off the bat, that you're a halfway decent human being and your job is to get their photo and get the hell out of their way when it's time to come or go or move left or right, whatever. And the Secret Service knows that that the Secret Service is there and they will fuck you up if you do anything stupid, to put it nicely. So we're all on the same page. We have, I try and get a good working relationship with whatever agents are attached to whoever I'm working with, whether it's, I got to photograph, everybody knows Mad Dog Mattis, our last Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis. He had Secret Service that were pretty cool. He was a pretty cool dude. I still haven't washed my hands after shaking hands with Sec Def Mattis. He's a pretty cool fucking dude. Because I don't know how many people he killed with that hand, and that's fucking cool to think about. Anywho's, but yeah, it's simpler. I'm sure it's simpler for me, wearing a uniform and being in the military to photograph these people. I'm sure Secret Service isn't as freaked out by me being there with the camera. They go through, and tomorrow I'm going to have to get all my camera gear x-rayed. They're going to have to go through my camera gear, my camera bag for, stuff like security reasons and stuff like that.
That's awesome, man. I really am curious about this too, because, you were saying you don't talk about it a whole bunch, like every now and then you mention it. I know you've talked about it on the streams every now and then too, but how do you balance the difference between this, really intense Space Force, doing this kind of photography along with your YouTube stuff where you're doing a lot more kind of like creative bokeh stuff and a lot of heavy edits in Lightroom and stuff like that? What's your work-life balance like with that? Or should I say work, I guess?
That is a really good question. So yeah, I probably should. Now I guess would probably be a good time to throw out my little disclaimer that says that I'm not, an official Department of Defense, representative, and it's not my job to be a paid spokesperson for the, Air Force, Space Force, Department of Defense, anything like that. I'm just kind of here, at least on this podcast, speaking, as a civilian person with my uniform, hanging up in the closet. Just kind of speaking for myself. But it does, and that's what I'm kind of talking about. It's a fine balance between what I'm kind of allowed to do for the military, what I'm allowed to do as a civilian, because I walk an interesting tightrope. Not everybody who's a military photographer enjoys photography. Not everyone was able to choose their job like I was. Sometimes your job's just randomly assigned. Like I was initially randomly assigned an F-16 mechanic. And I probably would not have enjoyed that, job as much as someone who, was a truck mechanic before they enlisted in the military.
Absolutely, man. I fucking love it, dude. Thank you so much for taking the time and hanging out and talking about all this stuff. I imagine you must talk about it so much at work, so it's probably annoying to kind of go through all this stuff with me, but I really appreciate you hanging out and breaking it down. Like, I seriously, man, have so much more information about the Space Force now, and it's so interesting. Like, I feel like I have to go stalk out your social medias and maybe start posting some memes for you.
Oh yeah, feel free to drop some stuff. Just like don't drop my name or anything, because then once again I'll get fired.
Yeah. JT told me to do this.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll be
I would
banning you
never.
very soon.
Hell yeah. So where can people find you if they're looking for either your portrait work, your YouTube stuff, or your involvement with the Space Force?
Yeah, so I would primarily point people to either my YouTube channel or my Instagram, which is Instagram is at Run and Gun Photo, I believe, and then you can find me, fairly easily as Run and Gun Photo on YouTube as well. Obviously, that name kind of comes from my run and gun military style of photography. Photography,
dude.
Yeah. Apparently, I'm a photographer that just floats around and gets, sprinkles magic photo dust on things and throws sand on your fucking sensor when you sleep.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, photographers. That shit's real. Be afraid. Is that the goosebumps? Be very afraid. Oh shit. Okay. I think I fucked up my own plug. I quit.
No,
I think I'm
fine.
good.
It's over. Links in the description. Thanks for tuning in. Dude, thanks again for hanging out. Appreciate it.
No problem. That was a blast.